Hi, it's Alana here from beautiful New Zealand. Today I'm going to be making some nests just like this one. The students at work found this for me. It had been blown out of a tree by the looks of it. Big shout out to Huri Whanua 727. I miss you guys already. There's several different ways we're going to make these, and you can use them in your crafting projects or your home decor. So a bit of art imitating nature today. I'll be making something with this at the end of the video. So stick with me. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Welcome to my crafting channel at Upcycling NZ. Let's upcycle. These are the materials that I'll be using today. I've got some dried lichen from the garden. This is some moss that I got from a thrifted floral display. I have some wood shavings that came out of packaging. And I've got a variety of different grasses and a few twigs from a tree. So you won't need to go out buying fancy materials for making your nests in this project. The wood shavings were a wee bit blonde for me, and I thought I'd make them look a little bit more natural by adding a bit of coffee to some water. This is just instant coffee. And once I've got that the colour I want, I'm going to add a little bit of antiquing wax. It's a folk art product, and I'm just going to add about half a teaspoon of that. That'll help that coffee stain to soak into the wood. Now I'll just add my wood shavings and I'm going to push that down until it's soaking in that liquid, and I'll set that aside for an hour. Next I'm taking 2 teacups and a sugar bowl, and I'm going to line them with some cling film or saran wrap. I'm using PVA wood glue mixed with water for this, but you could use any white glue that sets clear. And I'm using about 1 part glue to 3 parts water, and I'll just mix that in well. I've taken my grasses and I've been twisting them, and I'll submerge them and start to create a coil, twisting as I go to help hold all of those fibres together. This will begin to form the basis of my nest. Then I'll add my next length of grasses simply by twisting the ends together. Then when I've got roughly the right shape, I'm going to drop that into my teacup that's lined. I'll twist and tuck away the ends around the top. Now I'm going to take a little bit of lichen and I'll pull back the sides and tuck it down so that you can see it from the outside when it's formed. Then to soften up the inside of the nest, I'll use a little bit of that moss from my floral display that I thrifted. I'm spreading that out, and then I have a little salt shaker that's just the right shape to press down and create a hollow inside the nest. Then I'll tuck my little loose fibres away, and that one's done. It comes about halfway up the teacup. Moving on to the next one, this time I'm going to use a little bit of that floral moss first. Then I'll add a little bit of that lichen around the base of the cup. This is a very messy project, so make sure you protect your working area or your table surface. I've got some wallpaper down to protect mine. However, by the time I'd finished my projects today, I'd managed to use up every single scrap of these materials. I'll add some floral moss again to soften the inside, press it down, and then I set these aside to dry. I sat these on my oil-filled heater, and I had to turn them out of the mould about halfway through the drying process so that the bottom could dry. And here's how they looked in the end. That's the first one I made, and here's the second one with the moss at the bottom. They couldn't really get any cuter than that. How adorable. But wait, they actually can get cuter. Here's some eggs that I made in last week's video. I'll link it down in the description for you if you want to have a look. Back to those wood shavings. They're soaked now, and I'll squeeze them out, put them in a pot and dry them on my heater. Now I'll move on to that sugar bowl sized nest, and I'll use the wood shavings for this. This is how they looked before and after I stained them. You could finally shred some brown paper for this project if you wanted to do something similar to this look. I'll use some PVA wood glue again, mixed with a bit of water. I think Mod Podge would work for this project as well. So now I'm just going to dip my wood shavings in the glue and start to mould and create the shape that I'm looking for. And I'm still adding a little bit of that lichen and a little bit of that moss. I used the lid off a cream can to hollow out the nest and to press it down, but I felt like it needed just a little bit more structure around the top of the nest, so I'm breaking up some of the wood shavings into little pieces. I'll put that in the glue and I'll just add that around the areas that I think needs a little bit more strengthening. Now that I'm happy with this one, I'll set it aside to dry. Here's how this one turned out, and it reminds me of the bird's nest we used to find in the hay sheds on the farm. I'll put some little robin's eggs in this one. Okay, now let's see if I can make a nest in the same way that a bird would. I'm going to take some twigs from a tree. Let's imagine that one of them is still attached to the branch of the tree, and I'm going to use a bit of hot glue to hold them together. A bird wouldn't be using hot glue, of course, but it would probably seek out a nice frame for its nest to sit in, which is what I'm creating and building with these twigs. Now I'm just trimming off the excess. I don't want my nest to be too big. Now I'm just going to reinforce my frame with hot glue. I'll take some of my grasses and I'll hot glue the end to the base. I'll do that with 2 lots, making sure they're nice and secure. Next I'm going to take some strands of the grass and start to twist it, and I'm finding that it's a lot easier if I add a bit of that floral moss to it to hold it together. And I'll coil that just so that I can create the very centre of the nest on the other side of my frame and be able to work around it while I'm building the rest of the nest. I'll add a dab of hot glue there to hold it in place. Then I can flip my frame over again and start to weave my other grasses through the frame. I'll continue this process, adding a dab of hot glue here and there until I'm happy with the shape of my nest. It's looking good now, and I'm just going to soften the inside of the nest again using some more of that floral moss. I'll just tidy up my nest by trimming off all of those pokey out bits, and this one's done. It just needs some eggs, of course, and I'll add these beautiful little blue-green ones. I love the little tiny ones I've made, but I think this one is my favourite. The next nests I'm making are more a manufactured look. So I'm taking a little ceramic Christmas tree ornament. I'll craft with these later. And I'm putting it in a jar, covering it with Glad wrap. Then I'm taking another jar with a lid and I'll pierce a hole in the top of the lid. This is just a little trick to make my job easier, but you don't have to do it this way. I'll open the hole up a little bit more. Then I'm going to take some jute twine Inside the jar I'm going to make another glue mix, so I'm using 1 part wood glue and 3 parts water. I'm mixing it up really well. Then I can start to put my jute twine down into the jar, and I'm going to get enough to make one nest. And I'm guesstimating that it's just a bit less than 1 metre of twine. And I'll thread the very end of that through the hole at the top. Then when I close the jar down, I can shake it up and get glue all over that twine. And when I want to use it, I'll be able to pull it out and I won't be dripping my glue everywhere. So to start my little nest, I'm just going to start to twist the twine between my fingers and coil it up. And that coil will grow in my fingers as I'm developing it. I'll keep doing that until it's too big for me to keep doing with my fingers, and then I'll lay it down on my mould. Now I can continue my coil by turning my jar. Once my nest is about the size that I'm wanting it and the depth that I want it, I'm going to double it up and start to come back the other way towards the top. If your twine starts to twist, just get the other jar with the glue in it and unwind it by using that end. See how that's all curled up? Now I've just taken the rest of the twine out of the jar and I'm going to coil it back in the other direction until I can wind it right up into the gap that's left. Don't worry too much if it doesn't line up perfectly, because giving it a good squeeze will just glue it all together. Then I put it aside to dry and made 2 more. Once they were dry, I just removed it from the mould, and here, look at these little cuties. Now I'll add some eggs, and I'm not sure if I like these better than the natural small nests that I made. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I think I might just love them all. They're just so gorgeous. Alright, now I'm going to work on that natural nest. And this one had some built-in security because there's some sharp edges in this nest. Obviously protection for the babies. It's quite damaged though. It looks like half of the nest might have been left in the tree when it blew out in the storm. So I'm going to do a little bit of repair work, and I'll start with some twigs and strengthen the nest around the outside. I found this to be actually quite a bit harder than making the nest from scratch, and I guess it's a bit like renovations. It's harder to do up an old house than it is to build new walls. So next, to secure everything together, I started with some black thread and found that that was actually really difficult to use because I couldn't see where the thread was half the time. So I changed to some twine and found that a lot easier. And I'm just going to basically sew the sides together so that they're not quite so flaky and won't try to fall apart the way that it has been. Okay, I think I'm about happy with the shape of that. Now I'm going to take some dried lichen again. I'll break it up into pieces and soften the inside of that nest. This time I'm just going to poke it in and use a skewer stick to help to weave it into the existing nest. Have a little listen to this, guys. That's my cat Zipper interfering with my audio. I have to fight that quite often when I'm trying to record. So what do you think, Zipper? Does it look like a nest that a bird would want to move into? Not while you're around. I've trimmed and tidied up my nest, and now I'll move on to using this in an actual project. I've got a couple of toy blocks here. One's triangular, one's rectangular. And I've also got a couple of little squares of pallet wood. I'm using some little nails to attach the triangle to the top of the rectangle piece of wood. and I'm making a little letterbox. I managed to make a mess of my nails putting them in, but I'll be painting it so it won't matter so much. I made a little hole with a drill bit the same size as a stick which came with the sponge brush that I've used up. I'll put some wood glue in the hole and push the sponge stick on, and then I'll just wipe away any excess, and I'll just try to fill a little bit of those nail holes in with the glue. And there's my little letterbox, which I'll set aside to dry. I want to be able to hang this little project, so I've got this flexi wire. It's quite soft and pliable, and I'm going to fold it in half. I'll put some pressure on that and get it as close together as I can, and then I'm going to curve back the loose wires and start to form kind of a heart at the top. Then I can twist those two loose wires together and I'll create a little hanger by doing that. Now I'll roughly shape the wire around where I want it to go on the top of one of my pallet wood blocks. I'm using a small drill bit, and I'm going to drill 2 holes on a diagonal from the top down to the side on each side of my block. Now I'll thread my wires down through those holes, and I'm taking my pliers and I'm just going to reshape my heart a little bit at the top. To secure my wire ends, I'm going to twist them around my skewer stick. It's quite a thick skewer stick I'm using here, and create little springs from the wire. And I'll do that to both sides. My second piece of pallet wood had a bit of rot in it and was a bit brittle, so I broke that off. Now I'm just going to sand off the very sharp edges at the corners. I want to leave it rough sawn and rough looking, but I don't want people to get scratched by it if they're passing by. I want to create a little shelf with that broken off piece. So I'll drill a couple of holes on an angle so that they grip tight to the board behind it. And I'm using a couple of screws that are long enough to go through both boards and grip tight. I'll partially drill those in, just makes it easier to connect, and then fix the boards together. So now you might be able to see where I'm going with all of this. I'm going to fix my little letterbox next to my little nest. So I need to mark where that letterbox needs to go. And to do that, I needed to get my hair all up in the shot and putting the camera out of focus. So I drilled the hole the right size for that skewer stick and popped it in to see how it looked. Oh, the cuteness factor in this video is just off the scale. So I glued the hole where the skewer stick went, and I glued the back of the letterbox, and now I'm just going around the edges to fill in the gap. I'm going to embellish my background there with a transfer, so I'll just sand it back a little. And the transfer I've chosen is a big love heart to go with the hanger at the top. To use these transfers, you just peel off the backing, get your placement right, and do that before you lay your transfer down. So I'm just removing a little bit of the plastic because it got in the way. Make sure that's where you want it before you lay it down. And then you use the transfer stick that comes with your pack. It's just a little plastic spatula, and you'll notice that the transfer starts to change colour as it lifts. Now this transferred perfectly onto this wood. I made sure I dusted off any sanding residue. I'm ensuring that every area has been rubbed. And then when you go to lift your transfer sheet, just start slowly and make sure none of that transfer is stuck to your transfer sheet, otherwise you can just put it back down and rub it again. Then you just burnish your transfer by rubbing the transfer sheet all across your design. Now with some black exterior paint, I'm going to paint the wire hanger. The little springs on the sides. The roof of my little letterbox. The little pole that it's standing on. And all of the raw sides. I let that dry, and when I came to do the second coat I included the top where the wire comes out. It just seemed to marry in better that way. And I'm just shadowing all the way around the edges with a dry brush. Now I can put my little bird's nest on there, and I'm going to position it on a bit of an angle and give it quite a lot of hot glue to hold it in place. I'm adding some little speckled white eggs. Alexa, what small bird lays small white speckled eggs?
Quail eggs are small-sized eggs laid by quails, a type of small bird.
Okay, so we'll call these quail eggs. It's looking very cute. Now I have one more thing to add to this little shelf sitter or hanger. There you go, course 727, that one's for you. And now let's have a look at today's projects. Well, that's all from me for this week. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed that video, please show me the love. Thank you to my regular subs for supporting me as always. It's the middle of winter here in New Zealand right now, and I've got bananas growing in my backyard. Bye for now.